Had a little break in the weather today, so I thought I would get this rather good-looking 1984 Mercedes-Benz 500SEC AMG out. The roads are clear, there's no salt. It's about, 38 degrees, so decent driving weather. But I've been eager to take this car for a drive since it arrived. For some of you, you may not recognize the body style, or you might think it's just some old Mercedes, but this was the nastiest, most powerful hot rod you could buy in the mid-'80s. This predates AMG becoming a part of Mercedes-Benz, so you would order the car through Mercedes and they would send it over to the AMG shop, where they would install the body kit, the suspension, the wheels. And yes, it does look a little bit Miami Vice, all dressed in white the way it is. But a big, heavy-duty Mercedes like this, even today, remains a first-rate car. You could drive this every day today without feeling like it was a hardship. This particular car is an 84. It's titled here in the US as an 85. That was the year it was federalized. It's a gray market car that came in from Washington, through Washington State, was fully federalized. So there are no title issues or anything with it. It's the last of the true hardtops. Both windows go down and there's no pillar in between. And that gives it a rather graceful look. And you can see here the state of Washington federalized it, gave it a VIN, which is the car's original VIN. They didn't change anything there. The nice thing is, being a Euro spec car, it has no catalysts. It has the 5-liter engine, hence the 500 SEC engine nomenclature. Mercedes was pretty good naming things. The 500 stands for 5-liter engine. S is for S-Class. E used to stand for Einspritzen, which was fuel injection. And then the C stands for coupe, or coupe as they would probably say in Europe. And I think this is just a dynamite looking car that runs and drives beautifully. Excellent maintenance. We have full records on it. So let's get in and we'll take a drive. The great thing about these Mercedes is that they were total engineers' cars. Mercedes engineers had pretty much the ability to do whatever they wanted with these cars, and then the marketing team would figure out how to sell them, which means that it's simple but beautifully built. And the thing that I like very much about these cars is that vroom start that they have. And the neat thing about these big coupes also is that it hands you the seat belts, which is kind of neat. Thank you. And once you're buckled in, it puts itself away. Set the temperature. I'll keep the fan on low so it doesn't get distracting in here. But all the gauges are online. The clock is working. Full oil pressure. Everything's working like it should in this car. Everything's beautifully maintained and very well preserved. I'll take a quick drive. Nice muted V8 hum, but nothing like a muscle car or anything like that, despite the fairly substantial performance that's on tap. Very quiet, very well insulated. You can hear a little bit of leather creaking around in here, but there are no squeaks and rattles that come from loose parts. And on a 35-year-old vehicle, that's rather remarkable. As somebody who grew up driving a car similar to this, all the gauges look very familiar. The big steering wheel with the AMG logo in the middle feels familiar. And I have to say that this car does not feel at all dated. It really runs and drives quite well. This is a car you could still drive every day today and not feel like you were driving an old car. Very polished and smooth. Everything is working. The engine's warmed up. All the gauges are in metric, of course, because this is a gray market car that was imported from Europe. It was certified early in its life, came into the US through Washington State, and was certified there and federalized. Although the nice thing about European spec cars is that they have a bit more horsepower. In fact, the 500 series was not sold in the US, that was Europe only, and that was widely regarded as a performance variant. The United States got the 560, which was a bigger engine, but it was not significantly more powerful, and it was really engineered for American tastes to have big torque and easy road manners, which Americans seem to prefer. But if you're going to do a car and you're going to send it to AMG, you might as well get the hot rod version. Like all Mercedes, it starts in second gear, which is purely a smoothness thing. But that big 5-liter V8 makes so much torque it doesn't mind, and if you really put your foot on the floor, it'll kick down into first and take off like a rocket. You know, you could almost think of this as a German Mustang, as it does have that rear-wheel drive playfulness despite its substantial size. But where it's really best is eating up hundreds of miles of interstate at insane speeds. Oh, the torque is so good. So fast. So effortless. This particular car still remains quite stock under the skin. It does have an AMG suspension, all the AMG body kit, and those are not reproduction parts, but this is a real AMG car. A few interior appointments. So it certainly looks the part. The unique 16-inch wheels. Yeah, it's definitely 1980s, but it's really growing on me. The more I look at this car, the more appealing it gets, and it certainly doesn't have a dated look like many of the things from the mid-80s, aside from the total white-out paint job. And I think that's one of the appealing things about both Mercedes-Benz and the AMG products, is that they have kind of a timeless appeal to them. I don't feel conspicuous driving this car. It certainly feels like a grown-up's car. When you had this car in 1984, you were well and truly the man. And even today, I can see it getting some admiring stares on the road. People notice this big cruiser. But now that everything's kind of getting warmed up and moved around and limbered up, it's very quiet in here. The ride quality is excellent despite the lowered stance and the slightly firmer springs and shocks. Brakes are obviously hugely powerful for 1984, of course. And like I said, this is a car you could still drive every day and not feel like you were making any kind of sacrifice. I'm gonna take it down this road here where there's a set of train tracks we can bounce over. And you'll see that the suspension is incredibly compliant. Do have to be aware of the lowered ride height. You don't want to bottom it out. But nothing gets to you when you're sitting in the driver's seat. There's no unpleasantness coming from the road. And that big V8 up there, boy, does that thing just feel like it'll pull forever. This car feels like it could accelerate indefinitely. All the gauges are working. Mercedes Curious Economy gauge, which is really no more than a vacuum gauge. It seems anachronous to put it in a car with this much performance. Spends a lot of time in the red zone. But all the other gauges are working like they should. Climate control, I can feel it definitely putting out a little bit of air here, but I can also feel warm air down on my legs. Price tag on this car when it was new, taking into account inflation, was about $160,000 in today's money. So this was an extraordinarily expensive car. This wasn't just something you bought because you liked how it looked. I think the gentleman who spec'd this car originally, he knew what he wanted, and he went and bought this car specifically. And it was a time when Mercedes really was engineered like no other, as their slogan went. They had the smartest guys in the world, not constrained by insane budgetary numbers, but encouraged to build the best possible vehicle they could. Again, everything seems to be working. Lights, turn signals. There's no shudder in the brakes, no pulling, no fighting. When you ordered an AMG, you got this unique 4-spoke steering wheel, which is slightly different and a little bit smaller than the usual Mercedes-Benz piece, which had the large horn button in the middle and kind of the textured, rubberized rim. This is actually wrapped in leather, which is really the way it should be. And the car is just so smooth and confident cutting through traffic. I mean, I feel like I'm driving a great white shark or something, just itching for a fight. Granted, this car isn't as fast as most of today's big horsepower hot rods, and there are plenty of factory cars that'll outrun it. But in 1985, you had to be driving something pretty exotic to outrun something like this. The transmission, pretty quick on the downshift. It was right there when I needed it, even though they tend to feel a little bit lethargic in these cars, simply because of the fact they start in second gear. But I think it understands that you're going to want to hustle a little bit. Unfortunately, they're not going to let me play too much with the traffic. But on our frost-heaved roads in Cleveland here, it really rides very nicely. Nice little bit of gear whine. I'm in third gear, and a little bit of gear whine there that sounds racy, not like something's going wrong, but lets you know that something's happening. I'm extremely impressed by how good the sight lines are in this car. Of course, having no pillars, it's a traditional hardtop, but even out over the hood, despite this being a gigantic car, I can put the tires right where I want them. I can see the edge of the road, I can see the edge of the car. They really were better. I don't care what you've driven and what your experience is. Driving a Mercedes-Benz built at the peak of their engineering prowess is still a special occasion. No lights, no problems here on the dashboard. Everything is working. This car has been extensively serviced, and we have a file of receipts 1.5 inches thick of all the things that have been done to this car. And you know, one of the great things about the Mercedes V8 is that it uses a timing chain, but the chain and tensioners tend to give up after 35 years. So that's been recently replaced, and that'll be the big thing that a lot of people ask about. The car does have functioning climate control, including the air conditioning, which is ice cold. The gauges work. And it does include a full set of manuals, which are in German, of course, being a European market car. It does have its full tool set, which is important to enthusiasts. It has the first aid kit in the back, and it comes with the original spare tire still sitting in the well back there. I don't think it's ever been down. But the list of service parts and repairs and just proper maintenance that this car has received should give anybody who owns it a lot of confidence that it's been properly maintained and ready to enjoy. And given the legendary durability of these cars, it's got another 35 years in it for some lucky owner. This is really a joy to drive. The more I look at this car, the more I like it.